The Baltimore Ravens and the San Francisco 49ers will match up on Monday night, on Christmas night, for a potential game of the year. We talk about why the MVP could be decided in that outcome. All that and more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thanks so much for being here with us and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. We are free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube and audio form wherever you get your podcast. So be sure to subscribe, follow along for 5-day-a-week plus more Ravens content. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Here with me as our Purple Friday guest is former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver and a Super Bowl champion, Qadry Ismail. And Q, we don't have to guess anymore about if the Ravens are going to make the playoffs. They are 100% in. They clinch with a win over the Jaguars in week 15, 23-7. And now the sights are set, obviously, on that number one seed. And if they can continue their momentum, and even though they played San Francisco 49ers this week, we'll talk about that game. It's arguably the least important game left on their schedule, despite how big it's going to be.
I'll tell you what, when you get into a scenario like the Ravens have, where you control your own destiny to get into the playoffs, and you clinch this early, that says the bottom line, you're a good football team. You're a team that, yes, every game is going to be a marquee game. Every game everyone's going to be talking about. And yes, you're going up against another team similar to you in the, what are they, 11-3 as well, I believe.
Yep.
San Francisco 49ers, they put themselves in great position with their offensive play, their defensive play. They've gone into the Lions' den like Philadelphia and won big. And so they have had those signature wins as well. I think this is what makes this game so compelling. But for us as Ravens Nation and the flock, I think for what we have expected since training camp is coming to fruition. This is a team that is built for a deep playoff run.
And I think that you're right. They're showing it week in and week out here, where the defense has just been playing lights out for the majority of the season. The offense, despite the inconsistencies, has started to become a bit more consistent overall. And when you talk about this San Francisco game, it has so much allure, so much draw. You mentioned 2 11-3 teams. And I mean, I think we can safely say now, Q, it's the best team in the AFC in the Ravens and the best team in the NFC, the 49ers, kind of battling it out for what could be bragging rights in a potential Super Bowl matchup. And Lamar Jackson was asked about it on Wednesday. He said, we're in December. This is not February. And so I think that's a great mindset to have, first of all, but it's almost like maybe a little taste test before what potentially could be the real thing. But it's more than just a potential Super Bowl matchup, Q, because I think with the MVP award, it's looming. It's a 2-guy race, in my opinion, here, 2-quarterback race. Now, you can argue maybe Christian McCaffrey could be in the conversation, Tyreek Hill. But you look at the odds on FanDuel right now, our friends over there here on Locked On Ravens. Brock Purdy currently the favorite at -200 at the time of this recording. Maybe things have fluctuated by the time you're listening. But Lamar Jackson is second at +500. Obviously, Dak Prescott did not have a great game last week. That clearly tanked his odds in the MVP race. Josh Allen actually jumped Dak after the game he had against the Dallas defense. But it feels like, regardless of the outcome of this game, whether San Francisco wins or Baltimore wins, it's going to have a profound impact on who's going to win this award, because Brock's having a great year, Lamar's having a great year, but this is another opportunity for both guys to kind of make a statement on prime time in one of the biggest games of the season.
I think from a voting aspect of things, from the way obviously both teams are playing because of Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson's play, that's what you look for. And that's for, I know for Lamar, he doesn't really care. And I genuinely believe that. I don't think this is like conjecture. I don't think this is where, he's trying to be overly humble. I think he legitimately realizes that that's all well and good. You win an MVP. sure, it gives you a certain cachet. But ultimately, if you can't win a Super Bowl, you're not validated for him. And that's what he wanted the day he was drafted. But to be in that upper tier level of conversation as one of the greatest of all time, you have got to win the Super Bowl. But for Lamar Jackson, he is playing at an MVP level. So let us talk about it. And let us talk about just the phenomenal job that he's done. He's putting his team on his back time and time again. Whereas I think, Brock Purdy, taking nothing away from him from a game manager aspect of things. I know that word has been thrown around quite a bit lately, but he doesn't lose games. He runs the offense. He gets it out to all his guys, but he's got some dudes. He's got the George Kittles, the Debo Samuels. He has CMC in the background where he can just get it to him in the backfield, handing it off out of the backfield in the screen game, in the waggle, bootleg action game. You got people to get the ball to. So I think for Brock Purdy, it's in his favor, sure, and he's taking full advantage of it. But just from the little details, I just think that Lamar Jackson right now is that guy to say he's MVP.
And we're on the same wavelength, you and IQ, because I agree that Brock right now, in terms of national media, who's getting the hype, he's kind of the guy that's out in front right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with, you look at just the base, let's just call them box score stats, right? Brock Purdy, number 2 in passing yards in the league, 3,795. Lamar is 15th with 3,105. You look at passing touchdowns this season, Brock Purdy, number 1 in the league with 29. Lamar is number 17 with 17. And even though I don't think it's the way the award should be thought of in terms of this is what counts for an MVP, like I look more completion percentage and, average yards per attempt with both Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson rank highly in regardless. But if you take Brock Purdy off the 49ers, Q, versus if you take Lamar Jackson off the Ravens, when I think about the 3 words, most valuable player, I think right then and there, you look at San Francisco's roster and what were the questions all offseason for them? It was, do they have a quarterback? The rest of their roster is so good, but do they have the quarterback that can just take them there? Can they get not below replacement level play out of their quarterback? If so, anybody, not anybody, but a lot of quarterbacks could take them to the promised land. With Lamar and the Ravens not taking away from what the Ravens did in the offseason to get Lamar more weapons, bringing in Zay Flowers and Odell and all those guys. But if you take Lamar off the Ravens queue, we have seen firsthand what that Ravens team is. We have seen the ceiling drop, the floor drop. So I think, and I've said this for multiple years now, I think Lamar is the most valuable player in the league when you take into account when he is playing for the Ravens versus when he is not on the field for them.
Any team you put Lamar Jackson on, he elevates that team's play and he makes them legitimate contenders every single game, period. You can take the worst teams to the best teams. I think if you look at what, for example, if he was on the Bengals, my God, man, they're going to be contending every single year. You go ahead, put him on San Francisco. My God, they might even be undefeated. You put him on Philly. Okay, say what you want to say, but they would have wrapped up that division early on. You put him on the Cowboys. Jerry Jones is sitting there just like, la, 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 we're going to the Super Bowl again. It's that type of a player when you look at Lamar Jackson and what he brings to the table from his leadership, his ability to make big plays, his ability to just sense the moment and do things that other players can't do. If you're looking at Brock Purdy, I think, this defense would be strong and helping him as far as win games. I think his, receivers and such, I think Todd Monken would, devise some things for him. But I don't believe he would be quite in the position like Lamar Jackson is. And if they swapped teams and had Lamar Jackson on the 49ers. So I think that's where, for me, that's the eyeball test. And yes, numbers matter, but I think you're fooling yourself. You're not a full-fledged understander of the nuance of the game if you just strictly go by the numbers. I think Lamar's having a phenomenal year, but I think he's also having a phenomenal year in ways that Brock Purdy isn't.
And I think with the eye test, you look at the Jacksonville game. I mean, he goes, 14 of 21 for 171. And you look at those stats and you're like, well, are those MVP stats? But then you look, if you don't look at the box score, you look at the game he played, he was dicing up that Jaguars defense, looked cool, calm, and collected. The Jaguars couldn't bring him down. I mean, you had a couple of amazing plays, amazing throws, the one to Isaiah Likely obviously being the highlight of all highlights out of that game. But Jacksonville had very little answers. They had a few. But you could tell that defensive line was frustrated all night trying to bring him down, which they generally could not outside of a few plays. And I think it was a major statement by Lamar on national television that, look, he might not throw for 300 yards and 4 passing touchdowns a game, but the Ravens can still win by more than 2 scores with him not having to do a lot. And part of it is, Gus Edwards has 10 rushing touchdowns, 11 rushing touchdowns this season. He's been vultured there a little bit too. So if you want to go in the nuances of stats, there are reasons. The Ravens are still a run-heavy team. If you go by passing yards, obviously the teams that throw it more, those quarterbacks are going to have more passing yards. So that to me is why I go more based off of yards per attempt, yards per completion. But I thought Lamar made a statement on national TV on Sunday night that said, hey, you know what? I cannot have as many passing yards as this guy or that guy, but my team can still dominate the game.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. The fact that I'm going to beat you any way I need to beat you. One of the things that I thought was really cool in a press conference, and they talked about how he was having helmet issues, and he and T. Martin were on the same page as far as some of the play calling. And Lamar was like, at some point in time, I was just like calling my own plays. And, I might not have gotten the number that he wanted on the wristband, but I also called the play, and we made it work. And John Harbaugh, was seconding that by saying that, literally, we're doing it to the point where it was a smooth operation. It wasn't where, oh boy, Lamar, oh my gosh, we got to call timeouts. If the cameras didn't pick it up on the telecast, the NBC telecast, like you sure wouldn't have known at home. And that to me just shows that he has full command of the offense, and he's poised. He's doing what Lamar Jackson needs to do, which is, be the baller that he is.
And on the contrary to that, we saw in week 14, the Rams and Matthew Stafford have some issues communicating, and it arguably cost them the game because they had to use that final timeout. So Lamar's doing a lot this season. He has impressed me by leaps and bounds in multiple categories. Coming up, though, we'll talk about one of the offense's other weapons that will not be there for the remainder of the season in Keaton Mitchell. Talk about the injury to him, the timeline for recovery, and also more in how the Ravens can replace him coming up next year on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by DoorDash, and I'm a big food guy personally, and I know that sometimes when the game goes to a timeout or maybe it's halftime, I know that's time to order with DoorDash because sometimes there's just not a lot of food where I am, and I want something different. So maybe you want a game day package like pizza, wings, sodas, burgers, even just buns. DoorDash has it all. You can get delivered to you without missing the game. Or if you're a big snack person, I know I am personally, you can get some chips, dips, nachos, or everything you need to make your own nachos on DoorDash as well. Plus, you can kick back and kick off with unbeatable deals on everything you need for the watch party or tailgate that you're having. And there are a bunch of options in the Baltimore area as well for sushi. You can get Sushi Hana. For pizza, you can get Underground Pizza. You can get 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $50 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23, subject to change. Terms apply. Plus, you can get prepared before game day, stock up on your favorite appetizers, and order all your tailgate gear on DoorDash to get ready to watch your team win. That's 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23, subject to change. Terms apply. One more time, don't forget to use code LOCK23 for 50% off up to $10 value on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more, subject to change. Terms apply. We are back, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allstriker still rocking out with Qadry Ismail and Q. It was great the Ravens clinched the playoffs, but I feel like there was a dark cloud that was kind of cast over the game when you saw the Keaton Mitchell injury happen and the replay was brutal. I did not share it. I had no interest of sharing it because of how bad it looked. And obviously, right after the game, John Harbaugh essentially ruled him out for the season. We got the reports on Monday that it was a torn ACL. John Harbaugh said no cartilage, so should make a little bit of a smoother recovery. But I think people took no cartilage as, oh, he'll just be back and good to go at the start of next season. which recoveries are different for different players. And obviously we had this exact same conversation last week, Q. I'm not a medical professional. I do not know as much about the body as you do. So I want to defer to your expertise on this type of an injury. We saw J.K. Dobbins go down with a pretty gruesome injury, obviously, a couple years ago. Now that was much more complex, it felt like, than what Keaton Mitchell's dealing with right now. But how big of a blow is it to the offense, one, and could it be a blow to the offense in 2024 because he might not be out there?
Well, one thing I will say, I'm not a medical professional either, but I will say this. I do as a movement specialist and have been there, done that so many times from an ACL standpoint. I think there is some anecdotal understanding that I can express and bring to our people who are listening in. So with that said, I do know that, yes, without the cartilage being damaged, it does make a difference as far as his body's ability to one less thing to worry about, if you will. Again, it goes to show you from a non-contact injury standpoint, it doesn't matter the surface. It's amazing because people would have been like crying up and down if it was, say, at MetLife, but it was down in Jacksonville where that's a beautiful, just tight grass, beautiful surface to play on. Well drained. Obviously, there was some huge storms that were going on, and you saw the way both the defenses, Jacksonville as well as the Ravens, they were getting after it and moving dynamically. And again, you look at the offenses. Lamar Jackson was just phenomenal in the way he was moving. To Keaton's injury, I think, if he does the rehab correctly, there's going to be opportunity for him to get back. He's a speed back. And so that's where, he relies upon that extra explosiveness. So, his rehab is really going to be important to get, everything in working order to avoid, kind of that, man, he just doesn't have it. Oh my God, he was like blazing 4.2. Now, he's looking like, 4.3 high, 4.4, which in that world of game of inches, that matters, between 4.2 and then going up to a 4.3, 4.4. So, I'm hoping that he does have great recovery. I'm hoping that he has people in place that will, give him an opportunity, because the surgery is pretty A to B. And, ACL is ACL, but it's the rehab process that's going to make the difference.
And again, it's different for everybody. Some people take longer to feel like themselves, take longer to get back on the field. But it feels like the recovery times, as medicine has advanced and as techniques have advanced, has kind of trimmed it a little bit from, what was it, about like a 12 to 15 month recovery maybe a few years ago. And now people kind of generalize it more around 9 to 12. The thing with big injuries like that at this time of year, Q, is since we're in December and not September, it does make a difference in terms of coming back next season. Do you think that there is a chance that he is fully ready to go by week 1 with the no cartilage aspect of it? Or do you think it might take a couple weeks, maybe an IR stint at the beginning of the year before he's back?
So if it's just an ACL, I could easily see where, they'll have the surgery now. It's December, March comes around. That's 16, 17 weeks. See where he's at from there. Then you stretch out another 16, 17 weeks and see where he's at from there. I would say more than likely they would. You know how it is. It's not just is he ready, but it's like, what is the roster looking like? Who are the guys that are coming out there and playing well enough? Because if he is on track and coming back and looking good, then it is about being patient and perhaps putting him, on a PUP list before the season, and then kind of like easing him back in, because you do, again, depending on what happens, this year, obviously we're hoping that we're all going to be straight chilling out down in Vegas doing our show. And if that happens, woohoo, because we're going to be doing it live and we're going to be in person, not sitting there apart from one another. But with that said, I think it'll be great that he'll have a chance to kind of rehab, go through that 4 week, because again, now it's like, okay, let's retool. Let's focus in on trying to get a repeat. The biggest thing Lamar Jackson was saying, it's difficult to replace a guy that can go negative 10 yards in end zone and take it to the house. We know he was exaggerating, but the point is that any point on the field, he is a big play opportunity to score. I don't need him back early in the year. I need him, that latter part of the year.
And I think that with this season, it's going to be tough to replace that speed. You obviously have the elusiveness and the shiftiness of a Lamar and a Zay Flowers, but you talked about, Keaton Mitchell has had another gear, and then another gear on top of that, and then another one on top of that. So it's going to be tough. Obviously, I think the realistic replacement is Justice Hill, and I think that he was playing well before Keaton Mitchell kind of came in and essentially took his role from him and took the running back one role from him. But if you remember, Q, we were talking before the trade deadline about how the Ravens needed something, about how the running back room wasn't living up to snuff in some ways, and it was Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs and all those guys. Now they bring up Melvin Gordon from the practice squad of the 53-man. They also sign Jake Funk, the Damascus High School guy, Maryland standout in college, obviously won the Super Bowl with the Rams back in 2021. So doesn't feel like there's going to be any outside addition. I know I've seen the Mark Ingram the stuff on social media. I don't think that's going to happen. I will raise you one Devonta Freeman. I will raise you that option to see if he will be able to maybe make an impact for the Ravens. And why not? Maybe you can bring him in. He might have some juice left. But yeah, at this point, Justice Hill is going to be your guy. But are you concerned about what this Ravens running back room is going to be for the remainder of the season? Because it almost feels like, Q, and I want to hear your thoughts on it, it almost feels like Gus Edwards is kind of slowing down a little bit in some ways as the season has gone on.
Well, I think this, as far as Gus Edwards is concerned, I think his role is good. It's solid, it's sound. It's a short yardage back that can give you a big burst to finish off games in the fourth quarter. I think he's a phenomenal red zone playmaker and has a sense for the end zone. Not every big back can just score, and not every back has a sense for the end zone, and I think he does. Justice Hill, let's be honest, like he was having good play. He wasn't having consistent play, and what I mean by the consistent play is, unfortunately, he was fumbling the ball. Unfortunately, we're having difficulty with the mesh point. Those are reasons why Keaton Mitchell got an opportunity. Now, Keaton Mitchell took advantage of those opportunities, and that's what you always want to see as a coach and team. Like, hey, are you going to take advantage of the opportunity? Take advantage of the opportunity, great. And he certainly did that. But I think for Justice Hill, it's now, are you able to take advantage of another opportunity? And we saw when he was running the ball, homeboy was like holding on with two hands because the report is out. The report is out that he is a fumbler. And the only way you're going to, be able to dispel that is under pressure when they're trying to knock the ball away from you, you holding on to it. That's just the bottom line. So, yeah, he's going to have he's going to be challenged with the way he plays and the ability to make it look smooth. That's what we're looking for from him to take the place of the explosive Keaton Mitchell. Because Keaton Mitchell, to be honest with you, he didn't have any, there was nothing. If there was no negative play, there was a smooth transition with him as far as the mesh point. He was running it up inside. Yeah, sure, they took him out in certain passing situations where they might want to, the back to chip an end or something along those lines. But for the most part, he was considered an every down back.
And I think that whenever he got the ball, my thinking was, this is going for at least 5, if not 10, 15, 20 plus. There were very few times.
12 plus. And I'm not trying to be hyperbole. I was like, man, this is kind of 2019-ish when it was like, man, God, man, every time it didn't matter who touched the ball. Ingram, Lamar, whomever, they were just big plays down the field. That's what I'm saying. I just think that Keaton had that kind of a flow and vibe to it.
And you see that one play in the Jacksonville game where he goes to the right side of the field, comes all the way back, or maybe it was the other way around, but goes to one side of the field, comes all the way back. Lamar throws a block for him, springs him free a little bit. Those are the explosive plays that Keaton Mitchell can make. And while Justice Hill does have some explosiveness, again, as I mentioned, it's not that Keaton Mitchell explosiveness. So a big loss for the offense, but next man up mentality, much like we've seen with Mark Andrews, with Isaiah Likely, and Q's favorite player on the Ravens, Mr. Charlie Kohler himself. So in the final part of the show, we are going to talk about Charlie Kohler. I will let Q talk about his man. So coming up, we'll talk about the Ravens and Jaguars game and also get into the 49ers game because that's a pretty big one coming up. So be sure to stay tuned. Plan to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by PrizePicks. And if you're looking for daily fantasy sports, look no further than PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the most fun. So many are paddling up to 25 times their money this football season. All you have to do is select 2 or more players, pick more or less than good stats, and place your entry with the basketball season. Here, you cannot pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, if you're a big LeBron James fan, you can pick LeBron James plus Travis Kelce and a 10.5 combo with 3-pointers made plus receptions. If you want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, you can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to entry some of the biggest names of the PrizePicks community each week. Plus, PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy to guarantee you stay and play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Qadry Ismail talking Ravens football. And Q, before we get into the big game at hand, I do want to get your just general thoughts on the Jacksonville game. Lamar looked great. We talked about that. Keaton Mitchell had his moments before going down. But in the receiver room, I guess the pass catchers, I'll say, it was the Isaiah Likely show. 5 for 70 for Isaiah Likely. And then I think Rashad Bateman stepped up early. I thought he had a couple of nice catches. But other than that, I mean, again, Charlie Kohler almost scored on that play, got chopped down right at the 2-yard line. But for me, one of the storylines here is Odell Beckham and Zay Flowers combined for, I think it was 2 catches for 21 yards. Yeah. And it felt like when they were open, Lamar had no time to throw. And when they were not open, Lamar was sitting back there for 6, 7, 8 seconds, just kind of surveying the field. Now, part of that had to do, I think, with Ronnie Stanley, who, again, did not have a good game whatsoever. I think 6 or 7 shorted pressures. Next closest guy had 2. They definitely have a Ronnie Stanley problem over there in Baltimore. It's, I guess the rotation is how you fix it, but what is his role moving forward in that rotation? It remains to be seen. Defense did a great job. Kyle Hamilton suits up, was arguably the best player on that defense with the MCL sprain. And then you have guys like Brandon Stevens, Marlon Humphrey, Justin Madubuike all stepping up. What was your overall take on the game and how it went?
I thought, your assessment is spot on. It was a Lamar Jackson typical game, overcoming some of the deficiencies of the offensive line. Both tackles really, at one point you just saw where, good God, it was just like squeeze into the pocket. And, Lamar's like, what the heck? He didn't have a chance to throw. Now, the interception, I felt like he could have gotten rid of the ball sooner. And he got a little bit more, to use the word greedy in a sense, and tried to, knife it in that hole. I've seen that play 1,001 times. I was that intermediate throw guy. And there are some safeties. I remember playing against Green Bay, and their safety came down and knocked the ball down. And I know Elvis Grbac was holding it, and he wanted to get it out to me as opposed to getting out to the guy that was more the shallow guy rather than the intermediate. So same play. And that's something, I'm sure Lamar's going to learn, adapt, and kind of file away. I think there are other times where he can just get the ball out quicker. But by and large, you're right. You got to credit a defense that was missing their stud safety. I think their corner was down too. So their secondary held up really well. Thought they communicated very well. I thought Bateman and company, they had some opportunities, but yeah, they didn't really get into a rhythm, as you pointed out. And then, you look at the drop that Odell had. That would have been, just another good, solid Odell Beckham type catch. But clearly, as he rolled over the ball, released out of his hands, and that was a tough one. So overall, Offensively, once Keaton went down, I was like, dang it, because I thought he was going to, have an explosive. I mean, he did have his typical, we take it for granted, that 24-yard run. Like, that just goes to show you, like, just what he is about. Like, oh, my goodness. The ability, you don't cut back across the field like the way he does and get that many yards. I mean, that says an awful lot. So, yes, big picture, mother of pearl. I'm just thankful that the long arm of the law was able to do what he did. I thought, the communication with the guys, getting guys in position right before the half, to avoid any points on the board from Jacksonville was unreal. Marcus Williams did a phenomenal job of open field tackling. Just the recognition of it all was phenomenal. While Charlie Kohler and Isaiah Likely stepped up, I think that there's more for them to do. And I think, by them having that moment, what's going to happen, I think their number will be called more now. In practice, again, Lamar was like, I want to throw it to you. And he did, and he didn't come up with it. So he's like, well, what is he, like a game player? So I think the confidence to get them the ball happens when you make plays like that in practice. Overall, Jacksonville game, gritty, tough game, long arm of the law and company did what they had to do. But please, 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 somebody on the defense, cover the tight end. Like, how many weeks in a row? We got George freaking Kittle's coming up. He's like one of the premier tight ends. Mother of pearl. Do you not think they're not going to get him the ball? Like, please. Like, can we just cover the tight end? Can we do that? That's all I ask. Carry on.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, they're going to be facing some solid tight ends for the remainder of the season. I know Kittle's the best of the bunch, but they're going to have their hands full. I know Miami doesn't really have like that guy. Gesicki went to the Patriots in the offseason, but I just feel like with the Ravens, this is such a big game for them, but at the same time, it's not. Like, it feels both ways because obviously this is the game of the year, potential Super Bowl preview. We went over all the storylines earlier, but as we rank tiers with these losses, the two games that matter more is the Dolphins and the Steelers in week 17 and week 18, because if you lose to San Francisco, you can still clinch the 1 seed with wins over the Dolphins and the Steelers. And that's not me saying, oh, the Ravens shouldn't try in this game and it doesn't matter if they lose. Obviously, you want to win the game. Obviously, the Ravens think they should win the game, and they have made that very clear over the course of the week that, hey, you know what? San Francisco is good, but hey, we're a pretty good football team too. We're up there with them. I think it's going to be great all the way around. This is a heavyweight battle that, again, I think has the potential to be a Super Bowl preview. I mean, what are your thoughts on this one? Yeah, so bottom line, to me, it's a seasoning type game. How do you match up George, with George Kittle? Yes, Brandon Stevens has played phenomenal, and obviously, Marlon Humphrey had to get a little, I wouldn't say taken to the woodshed, but he got held accountable by Lamar Jackson, and clearly you can see where, he's like, yeah, I got to play better than he did. He played, a strong game. So Deebo Samuels and company, Ayuk, both Deebo and Ayuk they're ballers. They catch the ball. They do an extremely good job. What we saw from the Rams game, I think that's something that, you got to look at when it comes to some of the plays. Well, okay, so you got a good preview and you got a good look at two phenomenal receivers. Well, you're about to get it again with Ayuk and obviously Deebo. I think the weakness is going to be George Kittle. How do you match up with that? I think, Christian McCaffrey, the running game and the way in which we've done a good job against some other really solid running backs, I think we can handle him. I mean, I don't, he doesn't necessarily scare me. I respect him, but I don't think he scares me. And I think this defense is capable of limiting his production. But yeah, man, just the George Kittle thing, man, that right there. Because, and here's what I'm saying, is because you can have, CMC be contained, you can sort of kind of do a little bit with Deebo, but man, you get George, and we've struggled linebacker wise and safety wise with
a guy like him. Now you got those big chunk plays from him. Now you got that red zone opportunity, and it's at home, and things can kind of get out of hand real quickly with him. So hopefully, long arm of the law is available, and hopefully Patrick Queen is amped and ready to show that he's a guy that can cover well and tackle well in open field.
This is a big statement game, I think, all the way around for the Ravens. The 49ers are coming into this game healthy for the most part, not totally healthy, but healthy for the most part. I think we've seen the Ravens, and some of the narratives I've seen on social media is like, oh, they just beat up on bad teams and injured teams. Well, my argument to that is, one, you play who's in front of you. You don't get a say in who you play week in and week out. But two, I don't think it takes away, regardless of who the Ravens play, that they're dominating teams for the most part. They've put together some really gritty wins. That Rams win was, I think, a win that is a character-defining one, as we talked about last week. So this game is a statement one all the way around, and I'm really excited for it personally. But Q, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining me here. What's your prediction for this one? Do you think Baltimore pulls it out, or do you think it's San Francisco who gets it done at home?
Well, I mean, I think if Baltimore pulls it out, it's going to be like 27-20. If it's the other way, I could see it being like a 31-33 ball game, and because it's at San Fran, they get lucky and get the win.
Could go either way. I mean, two teams that, again, have proven they belong in the top conversation, and boy, are NFL fans going to get a treat on Christmas night. Now, hopefully the Ravens do not ruin Christmas for people, as I know the Ravens have been on the wrong side of that before. We're not going to talk about what happened in that game. But I do think that there's potential for the Ravens to really make, as we called it, a statement against the 49ers here on Christmas night. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Coming up on Monday, it'll be before the Ravens take on the 49ers on Christmas. We'll be back on Christmas. No breaks, no days off here on Locked On Ravens. We'll be talking about a full game preview for that and so much more. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here on Monday on Locked On Ravens.